How would you describe the English people's relationship with money, how it's developed over time, and perhaps where we can see it in literature and society?
Well, there's a certain ambivalence of the famous biblical statement, which some people don't get quite right. It's not money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. And in that sense, the English are fairly evil because it's been, in my reading, for over 1,000 years, a very monetized economy. Most peasant societies, money is important, but it's usually important on the fringes of most people's lives. Peasants and others live in mainly non-monetized economies, and money is important for the traders and merchants, but not for the mass of the populace. In England, because I argue it's been a capitalist trading market kind of society with highly individualized property and very sophisticated coinage. The Anglo-Saxons, for example, had the most sophisticated silver coinage in Europe, and they were important traders. So from the Anglo-Saxons onwards, the English have been not exactly obsessed with money, but money is just a very useful tool and not something to be frightened of. This is in some ways contradicted by several things. One is that certainly in the class system, although you should make money, as much money as you can, and money is the root of our class system, I learned from my parents and grandparents that money was something you really didn't talk about. You just assumed you had the money, and the upper middle class and upper class have therefore tended to make as much money as possible, but it's not a dinner table subject. The second ambivalence is from Christianity, because Catholicism particularly historically was very wary of money. You weren't, for instance, allowed to lend money at interest, supposedly in Catholic societies. And money was the love of was the root of a lot of evil. And therefore, although Catholic monasteries and Christian orders were very successful economically, and the papacy was extremely wealthy, there was also a supposed prohibition on the naked pursuit of money. So the English have had this sort of ambivalence, but it's probably along now, I discover to a certain extent, with China, the most interested in money, and as a result it made many of the important legal and other reforms which would be the basis for modern capitalism.
So that trait of money being central to society, you say, and have found that it's been there since the Anglo-Saxon period. I wonder if there was ever a point where it sat more finely in balance with other aspects of human life. So, for instance, and I'd be interested to hear you expand on your views on this, because I know you've talked about community never really being found per se within English society wherever you've gone to look for it, though there was a civil society and civic institutions that existed, even if people were very individuated. But I wonder if they used to sit more finely in balance, because I've been reading Thomas Carlyle recently, and he takes that line that you have just described, which is there's almost an obsession with it. And because he's writing in the period of the Industrial Revolution, he talks about the English worshipping mammon, the idea of just self-gain and the worship of money above all else. And he goes on to say that the cash nexus, this idea that the transaction is above all, and it has just shallowed and thinned out relations between people. is something that is very present within English society within the Industrial Revolution. What was there ever a time where the love of money didn't end up superseding all else that might matter in life, from your reading?
Well, no doubt Carlyle is a romantic and thought it was something to do with the depravity of modern civilization since the Industrial Revolution or whatever. And I would totally disagree with that. I don't think money trumps everything. There are other things which are equally important for most Englishmen through history: friendship, love, happiness of various kinds, which are not necessarily something which you can buy. As the ambivalence is there in two of the Beatles songs, of course. One is which praises money as money, money, money. You can buy everything with money. And the other says you can't buy love with money. So there is an ambivalence. I don't think there was any great shift, in other words, up to the Industrial Revolution or up to the Protestant Reformation, or there was a different kind of world. The key thing is what you can buy with money. In most societies, it's fairly limited what you can purchase. Many things aren't exchangeable in terms of money values. As far as I can see from medieval court records or agricultural estate accounts or the legal system, there was very little that was outside the purchase of money. And indeed, this is famously put, and I think I can't quote it from memory, in my piece, In the Culture of Capitalism, in a famous quotation from Shakespeare, where he says, money, you can buy anything. You turn black into white, you can turn prostitutes or whores into upright women, you can turn sin into salvation if you have money. Just get me money and I can change the world. And this is late 16th century. And I think he was roughly right. You could more or less, you can buy your way through the class system, you could buy education, you could buy salvation by having lots of obituaries for yourself or whatever it was, obits. So there wasn't very much. And the English were really, really interested in it. I mean, the famous jibe, which actually Napoleon didn't originate, but he's associated with it, that England is a country of shopkeepers. The original was it's a country run by shopkeepers, but both sayings are roughly right. As far as continentals were concerned, when they looked at the English and money, they said the country's just obsessed with money. They have no honor and they have no dignity, and they're just scrabbling around on trying to get a bit more money. I thought this was just a very Anglosphere kind of reaction. But the more I've studied Chinese history and been to China, I find that exactly the same attitude through Chinese history. Really? And that the Chinese have been very good with money, as they are now. It's deep-rooted, and they're very interested in money. Their motivation is pushed by the fact that it's such an unstable situation with people dropping from the top to the bottom and massive calamities and famines and so on, that you really have to spend your life trying to accumulate and protect yourself against that. The English being much wealthier historically, it wasn't driven so much by an obsession to avoid famine and so on. A lot of it was driven by the fact that social status and money were so tightly interlinked. In other words, if you wanted to move up the social ladder or preserve your position, then the only way to do that was to make money. And you could buy your way up the ladder and prevent yourself from falling. And therefore, money and the approbation of your friends and neighbors and everyone else was really basically founded on your monetary position.